And I'd like to thank Elsevier for allowing me the opportunity to come and speak with you today. Although I will have to have a word with Mark Lockie for having me follow on such a distinguished speaker as Bob and putting on the additional pressure. I wanted to speak with you today about the work that NEC has been doing around the world in deploying biometric solutions in airport environments. And specifically, I also want to touch upon the advent of facial recognition and how that can augment the processes that are typically found within an airport environment. Thank you, Fred, as well, for a moment ago touching upon all the different industry organizations that exist globally, just to highlight the point of how complicated airports can actually be. Many of you here have worked within airport environments, and it's not an easy place to do business or to roll out systems. There are many different stakeholders, and here's just a few examples of some of the stakeholders that you might find within a UK environment. There are government systems, the airlines have their own systems, the airport operators have their own systems, there's retailers within the airport environments, and all of these stakeholders have their own vested interest in how an airport environment operates. It makes putting a business case together for deployment of a solution sometimes fairly difficult. Who's making the investments? Who's realizing the benefits? Very often it's not the same person. Sometimes one system that will positively influence one stakeholder will negatively influence another stakeholder. So one of the critical success factors for any deployment within an airport is making sure all the relevant stakeholders are aligned as early as possible and are aware as early as possible. And there's one stakeholder which isn't on this list, and in my view it's probably one of the most important stakeholders, is the passenger themselves. The passenger doesn't know very often or doesn't care which system is deployed by which, if it's the airport operator or the airline. All they want to have is an easy, trouble-free travel experience. So the passenger always must be kept in mind in anything that's being deployed. Over the last decade, and even more recently, the last few years, we've been seeing technology very rapidly augment the existing workflows and processes that exist within an airport. We have issues such as mingling of domestic and international passengers within common departure areas, which is within the interests of the airport authorities because they would like to have all of the passengers in one spot shopping in a single set of retail outlets. But government organizations might want to ensure that the international and domestic passengers, for example, don't swap their boarding cards to enable an international passenger to transit through to a domestic airport. We have an absolute necessity to guarantee the identity of all passengers, which Bob has just gone on at length, and we've heard some excellent presentations yesterday. And moving this process out as far away from the border and as early as possible into the process to ensure that we can identify absolutely who is moving through our borders. But we also have organizations within the airport worrying about queues. How do we staff to peaks? How do we mellow out our staffing so we have the staff on hand when we need it, and then we can deploy the staff elsewhere when the queues actually drop? And how can we monitor those queues? And again, as I mentioned before, all of these systems need to be deployed in a manner that gives the passenger the best possible experience whatsoever, because at the end of the day, they will make the decision about which airports they want to fly to and through. And as we know, there's a large transit competition amongst a lot of our European airports, for example. Okay. Again, it's not just passengers that exist on an airport environment as well, but there's a large number of staff, both government staff, retail staff, the airlines, the airport authorities, and how do we actually allow them to egress in a manner that is going to enable them to do their jobs, to be able to enable them to work efficiently and undertake all the tasks that we need to be able to undertake within an airport environment. Okay. So I wanted to touch upon face recognition specifically amongst all the biometrics that exist, although there are opportunities for deployment of many different biometrics in an airport. And the reason I wanted to touch upon face recognition specifically is because the very rapid advancements that have been made within this technology over the last 10 years specifically. I mean, if you look at the data on testing between 2002 and 2012, as everybody here that knows about biometrics, there's two major measures that we need to be concerned about. There's false accepts and false rejects, and they're inversely proportional. So if you increase one, you lower the other, and vice versa. But typically when you measure or peg a false accept at maybe at about 1 in 1,000, 10 years ago we were getting 20 in 100 false rejections, which the technology would not really have been usable in that particular environment. The overheads of having to deal with all of those exceptions generated with those false exceptions would have put a huge cost burden on any organization that was trying to use it. Although we've gone within 10 years, we've seen some astounding improvements. In the last test that occurred in 2010 by the US government, we're showing that when we had 1 in 1,000 false accepts, we're getting a correlating 3 in 1,000 false rejection rates. So that is a huge, massive improvement, which now means, in our view, that the technology is ready to deploy and can provide real business benefits today. So I just put that there to make sure everybody's awake. But again, if you're looking at the scale here on the graph, again, when you had a false accept rate pegged at 1 in 1,000, some of the leading algorithms were 3 in 1,000 false rejects. And to put that into an example, for example, in an e-gate, in an airport environment, that means if you tune the system such that every 1,000 passengers that was trying to enter with somebody else's passport, one of them was allowed through. And that's arguably perhaps better than the performance of a border guard. 3 out of every 1,000 passengers that were valid passengers would be rejected within the e-gates and have to go see a border guard to actually enter the country. That is in an ideal world where you're actually comparing passport photos against passport photos. Very often one of the challenges with face recognition, though, is you're dealing with non-compliant environments where some of the photos are not necessarily taken under ideal conditions. You might have variance in lighting. You might have an angle on the face where the camera is a little bit off-center. You might have the face taking up a very small portion of the overall field of view. And these challenges now also all need to be considered, and the testing that has been done shows that the technology is now robust enough to be able to deal with many of these situations to provide value to the customer. So some of the areas that NEC has been working on in deploying biometric solutions and facial recognition would be with immigration and clearance systems. And I was in a conference last week in Warsaw run by the Frontex, which is an agency with the European Commission, where we were discussing exactly these challenges and how do we harmonize automated border clearance solutions across the European Union, and how do you actually develop them such that you get the maximum possible efficiencies through the system. And the main reason why these systems are deployed, security clearly needs to be maintained, but that's not what drives the business case for deploying these systems. The business case is driven purely by efficiency. We've all heard the word austerity far too many times in the last 2 years, and we're undoubtedly going to keep hearing it for the next couple of years. But that's not stopping a relentless increase in passenger travels. So how can we efficiently and securely manage these people and passengers that are crossing our borders with the same level of resources that we have today without having to increase our level of resources? And these systems basically allow our border guards to use their exceptional training and doing what they're meant to be doing rather than just looking and comparing documents all the time, which a machine could just as easily do. So if you can take the border guard away from that routine, that repetitive routine, and enable them to walk the floor, look for suspicious behavior, interview people, use intelligence-based activities, and have them stop just constantly checking documents, that really improves the efficiency of the overall system. Other areas that we can use biometrics for, and again, US visit is a perfect example, but checking watch lists, recording biometrics at the border, seeing if the person entering is somebody that we want to know if they're entering. But now we're also starting to see this being done with face recognition as well. The technology is accurate enough that we generate sufficiently few false alarms to not annoy the people who have to monitor the systems. So when the alarm does go off and somebody has crossed a camera that we want to know about, we can react rapidly and deploy the resources that are available. On the departure side of things, we're starting to see a lot of solutions moving through maybe capture an identity once, rather than having to provide an identity at every stage of the journey. You could verify that identity once, attach it to a biometric, and enable that passenger to move through the airport environment, perhaps in a completely ticketless environment, to have a nice journey through the airports. We're starting to see solutions now where we are deploying, again, face recognition for departure gates, comparing that against a face that might have been captured at check-in or at an earlier point in the process, and ensuring that we haven't had boarding card swaps in the departure area again. Okay. So as an example, some of the areas where we have been involved in deploying these solutions in Asia, for example, where we've deployed hundreds of ABC gates. We are processing at some of our locations in excess of 300,000 passengers per day through banks of gates within our airport terminals. Okay. I just wanted to briefly touch upon the fact as well that for the European market, we've just developed a relationship that I'm actually very pleased and very proud of. It's enabling us to take the experience that we have in deploying our gate solutions throughout Asia and partnering with a leading organization within the airline industry, CETA, who have a presence in almost every airport throughout Europe, to jointly bring our eGate experience to port operators and government agencies within the European Union. So not just on the border and immigration side of things, but biometrics is also being used quite extensively now on staff and access management. I know Mike and Neil, you've done some excellent work at Manchester in the past on landside, airside access using iris biometrics, if I believe it is iris, yes. So how can we ensure that people that are going airside are the correct people and are the valid owners of the pass that they may have? And that is purely a security-related application of the technology as well. One of the areas that here in our Cambridge labs in the United Kingdom where we've been doing a lot of work is taking the NEC face recognition biometrics and applying that and developing solutions for CCTV environments as well. So this, we think, has direct application within airport environments, and we're getting an extensive amount of interest from border police as well as airport operators on the deployment of this technology. It very simply allows you to take a watch list of faces, and the higher the quality of the photograph you can put into the watch list, the better the result that you're going to get. And it then allows you to take high-definition CCTV cameras and capture every single person that's crossing those cameras and check them in real time against the watch list. And if we have a potential hit within the watch list, then you can raise an alert to the border guard. Now, again, this is a technology that would have been inconceivable 10 years ago, purely down to the number of false alarms that we would have potentially been generating. Again, with the inverse proportionality of false accepts and false rejects, if you wanted to ensure that you had a sufficient probability of capturing the person, you'd have to lower the thresholds you're matching against so far that you'd be generating too many false alarms, and the person monitoring the system would very quickly lose any faith within the system. This is no longer the case today. We can actually take these systems and deploy them into very high traffic volumes areas and get a very small number of false alarms. This could be used for security purposes, for maybe the border agencies that are looking for specific people that are crossing the borders, where they might not be able to check the biographic or the fingerprint information and they only have a photograph, but also for airlines, airport operators. An airline may want to know, for example, when their first class passengers are approaching the desk or have entered the terminal. you may want to use it to control access to a departure lounge or et cetera. Or in the future, you might want to be able to try to actually locate somebody that is in the airport. We've all heard many times announcements in airports, which so-and-so passenger, please proceed to your gate, you are delaying your flight, or we'll have to unload your baggage. If you could quickly deploy a system to see where was that person last seen within the airport terminal to help locate them so we can get them onto their flight and make sure they don't miss their flights. We've just had a deployment, which I can't discuss in too much depth in a major European airport, but just to validate the technology, some of the work that we've done. In this environment, we were running a number of high-definition cameras that were running at 25 frames per second. And at 25 frames per second, you're going to catch each person 40, 50, 60 times. And the airport operator and the border police tested the solution by putting a number of their staff, a few hundred of their staff into the database, and then verifying the data with RFID cards. So they put RFID readers at the camera locations and cross-reference the RFID data with the face recognition matching data. The peak traffic flow we had to be able to handle was 1,000 passengers per minute. That's 30, 40,000 feature extractions per minute. And tens of millions of actual verifications per minute, depending on the size of the database, and being able to raise an alerts within 5 seconds. And in this environment, and again, I have to stress this was with good quality photos in the database, typically staff photos, but in this environment where we had 30,000 passengers per day crossing the cameras, we only raised 2 false alarms per day, which is a phenomenally low false accept rate. And we also identified, I believe it was just about 100% of the time, the staff, every single time they crossed the cameras. So we were very, very pleased with those results. Okay. The other way we've augmented CCTV solutions is to enable post-processing of passengers or staff or anybody that's potentially crossing a CCTV. So, for example, if people are crossing a camera, rather than searching them against a watch list, we can extract the face and store it into a database. And how long you keep that data, there's going to be privacy concerns, and you'll have to adapt to whatever your local legislation is. But we can actually store that with a camera number and a timestamp. So if at a later point, somebody comes up and says, has this person been seen today or in the last 2 days within the airport, you could search that database and point directly into your DVR where the potential sightings of that person is, so you can just view the possible video clips where that person is seen rather than potentially having to watch hundreds or thousands of hours of video to see where that person has been seen. One example of the way we've deployed this would be in an aerobridge, for example. We've done this at some of our Asian airports, where we put a CCTV camera in the aerobridge, and that way if somebody then gets off the plane, flushes their passport down the toilet, claims asylum, doesn't give any details, we could take their photograph, match it against this database, have a camera number and a timestamp, and we know what flight that person came off of, and we know their port of origin. So that's 99% of the battle in terms of trying to figure out who this individual is. Okay. And the last major area that we're working on with face recognition is enabling statistical analysis of how people move through a facility such as in airports, and what your peak queue times are and how you could potentially respond to these queues and staff your queues. So in this example, we're not really interested in identifying people. We don't care who they are. What we're doing is we're taking an aggregate view of all the people that are crossing the cameras. So whenever we see somebody crossing a camera, we see if they're already enrolled in the system. If they're not, we enroll them. If they are, we update that record. So then we could say for every unique individual, these are the cameras that they were seen at, and this is the time they were seen at that camera. So you can then build up a very valuable view of how individuals are moving through your environments, how long it's taking them to get from one camera to another. If at a certain time that average time is getting too large, you might want to increase your staffing to reduce your queues. But we could also apply numerous other characterizations as well, such as age or gender estimation. So, for example, in the duty-free shop, you can have a camera at the entrance and a camera at the exit. How long, on average, are people staying in duty-free? How long are your 15 to 25-year-olds staying in duty-free? How long are your males or your females staying in duty-free? Or, your 60-year-old females might be staying completely different amount of times than your 16-year-old males. And it allows you to actually get this variable, valuable information to both plan the layouts of your airports and to manage your staffing requirements. Okay. So in summary, it's a complex environment. Doing business in airports is never easy, and it requires alignment of multiple different stakeholders, all of which have to be committed to keeping the passenger at the forefront of what they're trying to do. We have government concerns such as border control and e-gates and enabling the efficient egress of passengers into the country and doing that in a very efficient way as possible to try to minimize your costs. There are multiple different classifications of passengers. You might have trusted travelers, you might have EU passport holders, you might have people that register for a system, and you might need to apply a different biometric depending upon which passenger classification that you're actually utilizing. We have security and surveillance applications, again, potentially for government organizations, but also for the airport operators and the airlines that are interested in who's actually entering through the facilities. And we are very concerned about enabling as efficient as possible a flow of passengers through an airport as possible. Okay. Thank you very much.